Well, well, well. Who is that guy?
Yeah, right.
So do tell
I want to meet that guy
again.
again, man. He had great flexibility.
Yeah. So this one's gonna be special. I've been doing this now for a year. I've been interviewing a millionaire real estate agent from around the country and just kind of peeling the onion back on the journey, not kind of the recognition or the ego of where we're at today, but how you got there, and hopefully we can learn some success principles and nuggets along the journey. And I was getting ready to prepare for this one, and I thought, I've never really peeled the onion back on the Rick Hale journey on the real estate side, because prior to owning the heart of Atlanta and being the OP and all that stuff, you actually were an agent, right? And
Of course.
and there's a whole journey you took prior to what everybody probably knows who you are today, right? And as we're doing that, I thought, you know what? Let's get Rick in the hot seat for once, and let me interview Rick.
Sure.
So thank you for being here.
Well, yeah, always happy to be in the presence of great people, and I appreciate your leadership. And thanks for those that are on the call too. Seeing your video on makes a difference. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. So here's the deal. I like to always kick this interview off with, give us a little insight. If there was a song, a musical song that was like your theme song to your life, what's that song?
Well, I think ain't no mountain high enough. Marvin Gaye. I love climbing things. I like accomplishing things. I like the challenge. I like the risk. And woven inside the lyrics to that song, it's really all about helping people too. It's like when you get to the top, throw a rope down or a ladder and help elevate, the people around you. So the combined energy in that song feels right to me.
Perfect. Well, Rick, knowing you personally, of course, that makes a lot of sense to me, but I think it helps everyone else to kind of understand your heart and how you view your life.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of go back. So prior to real estate, prior to all this, who's Rick Hale?
That's a big question.
Yeah, like what was the life before real estate? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to understand that we're the product of all of our experiences, and I'll start with a fundamental belief that I have, that I think nothing's unique or I think truly original in this world. It's what you choose to adopt as a philosophy of life. And for me, it's always been failing forward as a good thing, and it's also been about silver linings, and that things, I think the world happens for you, not against you. And that Murphy's Law concept of things being negative because they're not, it just doesn't vibe with me. So I recognize failure as a step closer to success. And then that's empowered me to take chances and risks that, I think not everybody would or will do. And I would just suggest you adopt that theory in life, and it changes the dynamic. And so going back a little further, though, how I think I adopted that was I ended up having to somewhat endure, but also grow into and through 10 different schools in 12 years as a kid. My parents were I didn't have the most stable of family, experiences. My mom and dad were both divorced at one and remarried a few times. And I bounced around. I lived with grandparents. I lived with both sides of my parents. I lived with a guy that my mom was even dating for 2 years, and his Polish parents in Massachusetts when I was in 7th and 8th grade. So I had this magnificent palette of experiences that, some people would go, oh my gosh, must have been terrible. And the truth is, there were times that it wasn't amazing. I mean, I spent 1 year in Venezuela when I was 16. And inside of that year in Venezuela, I traveled with a missionary for 6 weeks along the Colombian border, preaching the gospel. And I was just a witness to it. I was 16 and certainly not qualified or capable to contribute. But he didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak a word of Spanish when we started. 6 weeks later, I was fluent in Spanish and recognized, I came to the realization that our country is not just amazing, but the greatest place on the planet to be blessed to live in. And when I came back at 17, I didn't want to just kiss the ground. I wanted to eat the dirt. That's how excited I was to be back in the land of opportunity where anything's possible. Because what I learned is there are places in the world where some things are virtually impossible. And so that whole concept of possibilities really opened up my heart and my mind. And, and I spent a year in military school in 6th grade, and that was a boarding school in Florida. And it was a kind of a sad year, but I also found myself and realized that if it's to be, why not me? And then I overcame. And I think the story inside of all those stories, and when you bounce that many times, I really got good at making friends and starting over. And so that whole, and I also realized this is a funny thing too. I was thinking about the interview this morning. I actually had the opportunity to reinvent myself every time I moved to a new school and had to make new friends. I could literally wake up and go, all right, the old Ricky isn't that cool. And not that when you're young, cool is important, but all that to say, I literally could handpick my friends again. And I had this innate sense that, what I didn't want to become and who I didn't want to be with, and that you're the product of the people around you. And, in 9th grade, I had a memorial service for Ricky. I'm being silly, but I decided I was Rick, and then that was a different person. And as silly as that sounds, I feel like almost every day you can wake up and decide who you are and then live into that expectation differently than you did yesterday. And so anyway, philosophically, hopefully that lays the groundwork for how my brain sometimes works.
Let me clarify just a little bit for our listeners today is, you didn't typically have what most people would probably consider to be a traditional childhood, right? Like
No.
There was some brokenness, some change of locations, like you said, the 12 schools, right, or 10 schools in 12 years, I think you said. So thinking back as an adult, what did that journey instill in you? Like who did you become as a result of the fact that you took that journey, right?
Yeah, I think the greatest gift in that was adaptability and recognizing that the only constant is change. And when you embrace it, all of a sudden change becomes your friend, and it looks like an opportunity and not a detriment. So I think the psychology of change being okay and being normal, shifting markets in the world of a realtor. It's just what it is. It's not if, it's when something changes, and it's your ability to adapt quicker than the competition is going to lead you to either, squander, opportunity or wallow in the moment doesn't feel conducive to success, or you step up and you pick up your compass and redirect where your true north is. And I think it wasn't a choice. Let's make that clear. I didn't choose to bounce. I would love to be sitting here today saying, hey, I had this perfect childhood with 2 perfect parents and lots of brothers and sisters, which I do have lots of brothers and sisters, halves, steps, holes. There are, but there's a silver lining in everything. And if you seek out it's like you have to choose to find the good in it and then adopt an attitude or behavior around that advances you as a human. We're here to grow and here to make, I think, to self-discover our true purpose. And the quicker you get over the things that you think are, short-term detriments, the closer you'll get to that person.
Sure. At what point did you become aware of money?
That's a really good question, and I don't know that that's on the list. So
it's not on the list.
But here, so here's a true story. I'll reveal an absolute truth that I didn't plan to go here. But remember, I said I lived in Massachusetts for 2 years in 7th and 8th grade. My mom was dating a guy who was an international businessman, and he was setting up offshore corporations, and they were shell corporations, and basically it was a tax strategy to push money offshore. That's bottom line. And he unfortunately ended up spending time in prison for it. And so the short answer, though, inside of that experience, I remember I would travel with him because when his job wasn't 9 to 5. So I also realized, hey, people don't like my concept of work was like 8 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever. And he would just travel for business and then have weeks off at a time sometimes and do a few things, send a few faxes and whatever else. And then we'd go play. And he was a really fabulous human being. So just know that there's the silver lining. The unfortunate reality is that his business ventures caught up with him. The good news is for 2 years, I had influence from somebody who thought differently than anybody else on the planet. And I remember one day, we were flying out of, I think it was Panama. We'd gone to Panama for his business trip. But again, the business trip was a few hours and we stayed a few days. And there was like $50,000 on the bed, like in cash. And what was I, 14, 13 years old? And I just remember literally, I think I drooled all over myself when I thought about all the cool things you could do with that. And we had a really good conversation around money. And he said, implied basically Mo Anderson's money's only good for the good it does, and it's only as good as the face on it and someone's ability or desire to accept that as fair trade. And as complicated as that sounds, he dumbed it down to a 13-year-old's mind. And then I proceeded to, put $5,000 in a zipper, pouch in my belt and basically smuggled it in. That was the legal limit you could bring at one time. And so adventure was part of my growth. And then also the realization that if money's only good for the utility and the experience it provides. So I became hyper aware of money at 13. Great question.
Yeah. So first job?
First real job was at the movie theater in 10th grade. And I loved movies and I enjoyed, that was an incredibly fun job. I was promoted up to like assistant manager. I had keys to the safe and the door. And before long, I realized I also had a natural need to help people and lead people. And so I guess my boss recognized it in a very early. So great experience. And then from there, that was cool. But when I got to college, I realized I needed to make more money. And back then, I think that would have been in 84, 83. I graduated high school in 85. And I think minimum wage was $3.12 or something ridiculous. And when I got to college, I knew I needed to do better. And in my first year of college, my best friend, Mike Grafstein, we ended up living together for almost 9 years. And in fact, at that time, I'd lived with him longer than any single family member in my entire world. And so that's a fascinating reality. I chose stability at that point, I suppose. But this guy knocks on our door one rainy night, and his name was Shane O'Neill. And man, the guy changed my life. He didn't know it at the time, and I didn't know it at the time. But he was selling subscriptions to the newspaper. And he was like, "Hey guys, you guys want to buy the paper?" Literally his script was horrible and his pitch was bad. But Mike looks at me and I looked at Mike and I'm like, "Well, we like the sports page. All right, why not?" So he comes in and sells me a subscription. Meanwhile, 335. Thanks, Jeff Morbido, for clarifying. My research team is fast at work. And so the cool thing was he acknowledged he was not good at this job. He's like, "I have to confess," because I started asking probing questions. I'm like, "How do you get this? Why would you? And what's the allure of knocking doors? And it's a rainy, cold night." And he said, "Man, I make $20 an hour." And he goes, "I'm not even good at it." And I'm like, "Well, I can be not good at it and make 22 then." And I remember running down literally in my socks to find his boss, who was driving a station wagon with flames painted on the side with Krylon spray paint. And I begged him for an opportunity, and Steve Hammaker gave me the chance, and I ended up selling subscriptions door to door, and I made well over 20 an hour. And the job was great financially, but really what I got was a real taste of connecting with diversity. And every night we'd pick new areas, and I'd knock 75, 80, 100 doors a night, and I'd only get 5 or 6 subscriptions. So the fail rate, was 6% success rate, 94% fail. But I realized that success lies in the numbers, and that if you hit enough doors and you are intriguing and magnetic enough, people will buy what you're selling if it's a benefit. And I learned to really use scripts and also connect with people quickly, because you have about 7 or 8 seconds to make a first impression at a door, because no one really wants a salesperson at their door, especially at dinner time. And we would work from 4:30 or 5 to 9 every single night. But it was a massive growth opportunity. And the other byproduct of that I didn't realize so this would have been 86, 7, 8, 87, 8, 9. In 96, when I went into real estate, I realized because of that experience, I had an understanding of the geography of Atlanta and well beyond, in the 5 major counties, differently than most people. Because after doing that for 3 years and finishing college, I got my degree and went on to run a crew for 3 years and actually drove the station wagon. I had my own wagon. And so I was really very self-confident about, someone would say, "Hey, I'd like to buy in Gwinnett," or, "Hey, I'm thinking about Lake Lanier," or maybe Peachtree City. I'm like, I'd spent time in all of those. And I knew neighborhoods differently than most people, and it transcended into a success story in real estate.
There you go. So would you say you learned grit door to door? Would you say you learned hustle door to door?
Yeah, I absolutely did. I mean, like I said, if you knock 80 doors and you sell 4 subscriptions, that's 76 times you face a no. And more than once I had people, chase me with a gun or, physically threaten me. I mean, if you knock 80 doors a night, you're going to meet them all.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. And so at some point I realized also who my tribe was and who wasn't, and who I was, what language, not literally, but figuratively, would I need to speak to connect with each different type of person, and what aspect in my product best serves them so that they would be intrigued, not necessarily to just buy, but to have a conversation. I think step one is always to have a quality conversation around what they want and need, but you've got to be intriguing in the first, I'm not kidding, 10 seconds, or it's probably over. And so then when I ran crew, though, I learned the value of tribes and rituals. And we had some crazy rituals that, I probably get me in trouble if I shared them, but they were all fun, kind of fraternity like rituals, and mild hazing, but no one left hurt, just know, for the record. But it brought us together. And I realized the power of teamwork and the power of competitive energy and the power of, alignment really makes a difference. And so I think those lessons lent well to building a real estate team, a decade later, when I'd matured into a better leader.
There you go. Real quick, because I want to make sure this gets woven into your story, because I know music's such a big part of who Rick Hale is. And then I want to dive into your real estate journey. How did music get woven into Rick Hale?
Well, the short answer is in college. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of music. Absolutely love music. And I had a friend who suggested I play an instrument. And I remember thinking, well, it's a little late to pick up an instrument. Meanwhile, another friend suggested he needed a bass player. And I thought, well, the damn thing only has 4 strings. How hard could that be? And for all the bass players out there, I think it's the most important instrument in the band. Yep. Because it carries the underbelly of all things you feel with the drummer. But all that to say, I started playing bass in a garage band, kind of a punk rock thing going on. And I just, man, something about creating energy around vibrating strings and sounds with 3 or 4 other guys is just, it's an amazing thing. It's like painting a painting, and everyone grabs a paintbrush in the form of their instrument, and you all get a swipe at it, and the end product's the collective. And so I still play in bands and write music and enjoy it. And I'm still untrained. I never took lessons. I migrated from bass to guitar 3 years after starting, because I realized the palette, or the ability to construct sonic energy, was greater with 6 strings than 4.
Mm-hmm. So here's another question that's not on the list. You ready?
I'm ready.
What did you learn through music that translates to success in business?
So I think the easy short answer is just that I'm only as good as the people I'm with. And so if I want to elevate my game and become a better musician, I needed to hang out with better musicians and more creative writers. And the real bottom line when it comes to playing in a live band is that you can have the greatest ensemble of musicians on the planet, and if your singer's average or below, your band is average or below. You can have an average band that gets things done and maybe not as proficient or talented, and an amazing singer, and you have an amazing band. So there's key roles, even though everyone plays a part, there's certain roles that are absolutely critical to success. And without that, it doesn't matter how good the rest are, it's going to fail.
There you go. All right. So tell me, you got into real estate?
96.
96. So all roses and rainbows, or what?
Well, so what's funny is that when I joined, I'll share this quick story just because it's interesting and not common knowledge, I suppose. I had long hair until I was 30. So few people can buy or believe that. And, but I was introduced to a friend named John Shapiro, and I joined Remax. Keller Williams didn't exist in Atlanta. And when I interviewed it, I shouldn't name names, but some of the more traditional brokerages, I snapped a few heads, when spinning around in the office when I walked through with a long ponytail. All that to say, I was introduced to John at Remax. I felt like they had an entrepreneurial spirit that didn't exist in the other offices that fed my youthful energy. And that's frankly, that's how Keller evolved is the result of what they did. And they were revolutionary in their approach to real estate in the beginning. And John Shapiro was my mentor, and he gave me 3 quick tips right out of the box. First 3 things: cut your hair, sell your sport utility, and buy a sedan. And the third was wake up every day and lead generate. And he really set me on the right path. So I hired a mentor early on. That was a big difference maker. And I think he was earning around $450,000, $500,000 a year. And, I was coming off a $60,000, job that really just funded my musical endeavor. I only worked in my 20s so that I could, pursue music. I ended up at the Art Institute of Atlanta, in fact, to learn how to mix and record. So I really had hoped to merge music with business and find a way to make that my vocation. It never worked out. And then, married and a child on the way, and hopes of building a new house on a lot I just bought. And the realization that 60 was not the number, and I needed it to be more like 260. And so I found a $460,000 earner to show me the way.
So he obviously cut the hair and get a different car, are pretty normal advice, but his advice around lead generate, right?
Yeah.
So what was the advice? I mean, it's easy to say it, but what did he tell you to do?
I mean, he just reinforced what I think I understood already, is that it's a people puzzle and it's a numbers game, kind of like knocking doors. If you talk to enough people and have quality conversations around their needs and wants, eventually you'll reveal an opportunity. And if you can save, solve, or cure that opportunity, you'll have a friend for life and clients forever. And it's just all about your database. And the other thing he did for me, Brett, is when I was in my third month in the business, I had about $5,000 saved up in an account for like my business expense, my launch, if you will. And, and I gave I think that would probably have gotten me 6 months in, and I had enough money for living expenses for 6 months. And it's like that whole burn the ships, theory of, if you're going to really do it, commit and make it non-negotiable. And that's what I did. And in my third month, he walks by my office, and I'm about to date myself, but I was trying to mail merge to print onto clear sticky labels so that I could send a newsletter that looked like I typed on the envelope. And I bet some people are scratching their heads, but that was the thing where you would use clear labels. You'd hit and realize we didn't have automated systems. This was like in DOS. I'm trying to, how do I get this thing? And every time I'd go to the printer to pick it up, they'd be sideways, upside down, and crooked. And he walks by my office and sees stacks of papers and just chaos. And he laughs and he declares me a straight up cluster, fill in the blank. He's like, "You're just a mess." He goes, "Don't ever touch paper again." And I'm like, "Well, how do I get my newsletters out?" And he goes, "You'll hire an assistant." And I'm like, "I have $5,000. And he's like, "So?" And I'm like, "Okay." He said, "Hire an assistant." And Gary Keller reinforced this later. When you hire somebody, or you outsource or subcontract, don't think of it as an annual. Like I kept thinking, well, this is going to cost me $30,000 or $25,000 at a minimum for moderate, talent. It's really just $2,500. It's the first month, and then prove it right and go out and outperform and produce an ROI that paid for it. And so I hired Paula Barker, was my first assistant, and I hired her in my fourth month, and my world completely shifted. I quit touching paper and I started touching hearts and minds of people. And I gave her one script whenever it got weird or awkward, because I could only afford to rent one desk and one chair. So I would be standing over, and it was in a little coat closet. I bet my office was 6 by 8 feet. I was the low guy on the totem pole, lucky to have one at this particular robust office at the time. And her script was, "Who's your newest client today?" And so I said, as soon as I start, because I would try to be the boss, like, "Hey, are we doing this? Are you working on that initiative? Or one of these things going?" And she would just look at me and say, "Who's your newest client today, Rick?" And I would be like, "Dang, all right, I'll be right back." And I'd run down to my prior employer's office and run down the halls, giving away free M&Ms and business cards, and inspire people to buy their first house. A lot of my first year clients were first time home owners that I came up with 10 reasons why you should buy real estate today. And I would literally walk them through the process, and I would hug them into submission and get them excited about building wealth and having their own piece of America
With free M&Ms.
Hey, man, it works.
So here's the thing. That's a little bit of a leap of faith. I think there's a lot of people that when they hire their first assistant or decide to spend money on something that they just can't see the future of it, in the now, there's got to be a little bit of a leap of faith sometimes. There's got to be a little bit of believe in yourself at times. And it sounds to me like you did that 4 months into this business.
Yeah, with limited resources. And the person I ended up hiring came straight out of my networking groups. That's another lesson early on is, your network is your net worth. And I joined a BNI group. And in that group, I would come in and say, and I would try to be, the more specific you are in asking for a referral or who you're looking for, the easier it is for people to connect the dots in their minds. But on that day that I was, that John had that hard conversation about, "Hey, man, what do you make per hour when you're pushing paper?" It was kind of that dollar productive conversation where you look at your day planner and you analyze the things you did and what's the ROI on that investment. He's like, "That's $6 an hour, back then, maybe $7.50 or $8." And he goes, how much are you worth when you're selling a house, writing a contract, negotiating a deal, going to closing? And at the time I was like 70, 80, $100. I don't know. And he says, well, until you figure that out, you'll make bad choices with your time. And it was just brilliant advice. And so when I hired her, I committed to restructuring my day planner around the things that created highest dollar per hour. And that was out generating leads, building my database, notes and gratitude and, follow up. And instead of trying to figure out how to mail merge.
Yeah, of course.
But she was a game changer. Yeah, she was a game changer for me.
One of the things that I think I'm hearing in your story is, one, you were smart enough to have faith and take that leap of faith, but you actually allowed them to lead you in return. And you're trying to be the boss, but you realize she was helping you manage you and saying, hey, who's your new client today? And one of the byproducts of getting into a relationship with somebody is it actually causes you to be more professional. It causes you to work harder, and it causes you to have a deeper purpose. And you experience that early on in your career.
I did. Well, so I also had built-in accountability, because I think most of us would be almost embarrassed at how we squander time sometimes goofing around doing things that, in the moment are just a distraction or something to do. And later, if you were really held accountable to, the dollar productive or performance-based, invested time, you might rethink how you invest your time. And so having her, she'd show up at 8 o'clock, and all of a sudden my coming in at 9 or 9:30 was non-negotiable, because I don't want to be that guy. And I also just, like you said, you have a skip in your step a little taller, because all of a sudden I'm responsible, not just for me, but for her livelihood as well. And that accountability and that pressure made me better. It didn't, it was a benefit. And I also wanted to succeed on her behalf, because she accepted a job that really underpaid. She had a degree and she got a law degree, for God's sakes, way overqualified for what I had to offer. But she was enamored with the idea of working in real estate. And I'll remind you, there's talented people that if you could show them the path to wealth building, even if the job doesn't naturally, organically provide, investments, you can learn the path to building wealth through real estate, just being in the environment. And that was really what I was trying to promote for her. And she bought in, and there you go. It was symbiotic, and the accountability was undeniable, because I also respected her. And it goes back to hiring really smart, capable people, because if you don't, they don't respect themselves, and you won't respect them at the level that'll produce the best version of you along the way either.
Perfect. So obviously you're starting real estate, you cut the hair, you got a different car, and you figured out lead generation. You took a leap of faith 4 months into this without really the resources, and got the leverage you needed. What was your first taste of success? Like when you first felt like, man, I'm really doing this thing. Like, what did that look like?
Well, it was the end of my first year in real estate when I made $100,000 and like $8. And my goal was 100,000. And, I kind of look back and I laugh, because what if I set a $150,000 goal? I mean, I don't know how I landed that close, and I'm not exaggerating. I think I made $8 or $9 over 100, but that was my, flag in the ground, Mount Rushmore moment. I'm here to stay and turn some heads along the way, given my youthful energy at 30. So that was kind of my first step. And then
what's the next step?
So honestly, it was just it became a game. Like I enjoyed it's like a big board game in how to navigate people's lives and circumstances and creating opportunities. And thankfully I understood early on that my business was my database, and that by having, consistent reminders that I'm in business to do business. And then the other thing I think I did, people will respond. And the other thing I did is I recognized that my value to my clients was way more than just real estate and transactional, and that my network was a real valuable resource and tool. And I was good at just, making friends who had influence and potential to help others. And I knew I was winning when my clients would call me for things completely unrelated to real estate and go, hey, who do you know? Or where would you go to fix this problem or solve that? And I'm not talking just, I have a plumbing leak, which is an obvious reason to call your realtor. But if they have a problem and think of you first, you probably won their heart and minds, and you've got reciprocity working in your favor.
Yeah.
So anyway, to answer the question real specifically, so in 96, I started. In 1999, and another piece of evidence that your network is your net worth, and who you're with matters, and who you hang with, and who not just impress, but who you illustrate capacity to enhance their lives too. Like it's got to be reciprocal. Sean Rawls, became a friend. He was in my office and he tapped me on the shoulder in 1999 and said, "Hey, I'm starting in this company. It's in Atlanta called Keller Williams." And I think my response was, "Keller who?" And because we weren't anywhere this side of the Mississippi River at that time in 1999. And he needed a little bit of money to help launch the first seed money to launch the first office. And he also recognized I might be influential enough and motivated and inspiring enough to help grow something. And so he invited me into the inner circle of the Sandy Springs office. And I have an investment in that office to today. And it really lit a fire under me about, building businesses and not just selling houses.
Got it. All right, your real estate journey. So, 3 million, it sounds like, was your first year, right? Put you at 100,000. And then fast forwarding, when did you break 5 million? When did you break 10 million? And what did you do in that growth journey? I'm really kind of looking for some specifics here.
Yeah, that's fine. And I don't have it scripted exactly per year. I could do it, but I was growing at about 50 to 70% a year. So I went from like 100 to 140 to 200 to 240 to 3 something. And so back to game-changing moments, when I helped start the Sandy Springs office in 1999, I went to my first family reunion, which we drove down to Amelia Island, and there were 22,000 people, maybe 2,100, 2,200. The company only had 5,000 people in the whole company, and 40% showed up for an event. Blew my mind. And then what I got from that event, I remember Gary standing on stage going, and just if you could rewind the tape of what it was in 2000, but he was like, "We're going to create a platform where every agent can have their own website, their own database, and communicate and connect, and it's all integrated." And I remember thinking, how in the world are you going to create a platform for 5,000 websites? I remember thinking that impossible. But in that moment, I realized I was hanging out with the right person and with the right people, because he was thinking big and way ahead of the tech curve and way ahead of what real estate companies were, and it was all about the agent and your brand and your uniqueness, not what we do as a company. And I was so excited after the first night of hearing Gary Keller speak. I ran out to a payphone bank. Back then, cell phones didn't work everywhere and they were expensive. So you had to prepay for a card. And I had to punch in the 800 number where I prepaid for minutes to call my wife in tears to thank her for letting me go, because we had just had a baby, and it was it was one of those, she had to really allow it, if you will, because it was a sticky time with a lot of pressure at home. But I was so grateful, and what a difference it made. A year later, by the way, I was invited to Gary Keller's mastermind, I think. So that would have been 5 years in the business. I was making about 450 maybe at that point. And I was inside of the top 100, which today we all know is a different number, but it's a different time as well. And that was probably the next big mind-blowing experience, because I was invited into a room with top 25 people around the country. And to be honest, I thought I was doing pretty well until we went around the room and shared our stories and our volume and our teams. And at that point, I had my mom as a little quasi buyer's agent, and Paula was still with me, but I was a little team. It was mostly all about me and my ego to want to outperform. And as they went around the room, Brett, it became painfully obvious that I was the little guy, and that in a good way, but also in a, oh my gosh, what if I'm in the, what if I can't contribute? What if I don't, my voice is irrelevant because there's so many high producers. And thinking about it today, I realize if you're in a room and you're the biggest fish and the smartest guy, you're probably in the wrong room. And that year we flew out 4 times and we met for 2 days each time. And with Gary as a personal, conduit to the conversation, we brought our financials, we brought our marketing plans. He would require us to analyze and track our data so that we could share comparative feedback. And what I didn't know, Brett, is that he was actually building the content and the context for the MREA book around those masterminds. And I don't know, I think he ended up publishing it in 2009 or 10, maybe. And so this was the early phase of him. He's an incredible aggregator, and he's incredible at asking questions. He's also great at calling you out for things that, he's like, Rick, that doesn't make sense. Reframe that. And I mean, he would say it in front of a group of 25 top producers. It was humbling, but also a massive learning experience. And I'll share this. One of the greatest things I took away from it is that everyone in that room was incredibly learning based. And I was incredibly action based, and I was still learning based, or I wouldn't have been there. But when I say learning based, one of the questions you ask, how many weeks a year do you spend investing in yourself, traveling to classes and workshops and the answer was, the average was probably 6-7 weeks. And for me, it was like, I'm gone for a day and I'm having, ulcers develop because I'm stressing out about not being present. And the other thing I learned was that they were incredibly strategic because they'd been in the business longer and hung out with Gary longer around building, key people and spokes to the wheel so that they weren't all things to all people. And they had a better experience and they actually made more money. And there's a inverse relationship between the volume you do and the amount of stress you have. And I think at that point, I think I carried my stress like a badge of honor. Like, hey, I'm the guy. I can do this. I can handle it. But, what I didn't grasp is that the counterbalance piece was really, I was suffering in the balance department. And I was in charge of too many things, trying to touch too many things. And the greater or the bigger, the more volume you do and the bigger your team, you have to manage people, but you don't have to manage the experience. You don't have to manage the flow of stress and challenge. And it's less stressful to do more volume is what I'm trying to say. And I hope you heard that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how Rick Hale learned what leverage really is, right?
100%.
And stress would go up and then you'd get the leverage, and then stress would go up and then you'd get the leverage, right? And I wrote down, you put yourself in a room, whether knowingly or not, a big thinking room. And
100%.
And you grew into the conversations around you. We hear that, it sounds so cliche, but you're telling me a story of a dictation of exactly that happening inside your life, right? And then I don't know that you intentionally understood it, but you were a byproduct of being in that room. It caused you to think like a business person, right? Like know your data, bring your marketing plan. Would you have done that had Gary not made you? Probably not. You would have just stayed in the wheel of motion, right?
I had a shoebox with all my receipts I would take to my accountant, the first part of the year for the prior. I mean, it was ugly. So recognizing where you're deficited in capacity or skills and intellect, it quickly forced me to get organized and hire people to do the things that I couldn't or wouldn't do.
There you go. And the other thing I wrote down is you learned the value of being learning based by conversations with others, and people had to challenge you to really embrace that concept. But when they did, you exploded in that arena.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay, so Gary always talks about this leads, listings, leverage. Just give me your take. How does Rick think about leads and then listings and leverage?
I mean, it's the cornerstone of any great real estate business. And, it's it's up to me as the leader to make that a priority with my team. Because I had a nice runway and a real strong database and, had lots of good friends and past clients who were willing to refer. I also was strategic in asking for referrals and earning the right to ask for them. I didn't just expect it. And I made a big deal out of anybody who referred. And so I think early on, I learned that reward the behavior, not the outcome. When somebody sends a referral, it's easy to thank them and then, wait for it to close and then take them to, a steak dinner or send them a nice gift card or a personal gift. And the two things I figured out is it's kind of like Pavlov's dog, or, if you're training a dog, you got to teach them in the moment. You can't wait till later and then go, hey, by the way, when you did that, you shouldn't, go to the restroom on my carpet. It's got to be in the act. And so I learned when it comes to rewarding, it's kind of a silly analogy, but you've got to catch them and get them excited about the behavior because the outcome was up to me, not them.
So pragmatic around that. Like, give me an example.
A gift card and a handwritten note, or maybe go, grab a beer at the end of the day to thank them and personally connect and not make it about the referral specifically, but also make sure that you're celebrating their behavior. And again, a lot of people reward the outcome when it closes and make a big deal of it, but that might be 3, 6, 9 months later. And if you reward the behavior, they're more likely to repeat that behavior. And, it's about creating advocates and referral partners.
Window of time. I'm hearing you say it's about the shortened window of time attached to when that behavior happens. Yeah.
You want to, they did their part. They're done. It's not up to them to close the deal. And by the way, I also, irrelevant of the quality of the referral, it's easy sometimes to sort of monetize your sense of how valuable it is. If someone sent you the director of bank acquisitions in REO, in an REO department of a bank, you might do cartwheels and, send them something really valuable. But honestly, it took the same effort to refer a neighbor as it did someone they knew at the bank. So I treated them all as if they were all gold-plated, gold medal referrals. And I think it paid off.
So that's the leads list. That's the leads, right? What about
this? Well, in our team today, so we haven't really talked about the migration or the evolution of my team, but it was all about me. It was all about me in the beginning. And then I built my team, and then I landed in, and I was blessed to get an opportunity selling REOs in 2003, which, at the time, REOs, if for those that don't know, are foreclosures. And Fannie Mae found me. I didn't go looking for it. I get asked all the time, how did you get into foreclosures? And the truth is they were secret shopping agents in communities where they had listings. So back to the listings part, if you don't have listings, you don't have visual credibility for anyone other than the people that already know you, that are inner circle. And so listings that's your greatest billboard and greatest advertising. And it's the greatest proof that you're capable and you have capacity. And so in this scenario, he secret shopped my team because one of his agents inside the Fannie Mae network, she wasn't succeeding with selling a unit, and we had a unit, and he researched, and Ralph was his name, and he secret shopped Paula. I was in Vail skiing with my dad, and the standing rule back, at that point in my career was, hey, if it's a problem, handle it. If it's significant, call me, I'll jump in. But if it's something you can manage, and she knew, but she calls me and she said, Rick, this guy called today. And by the way, he didn't say he was with Fannie Mae. Obviously, that's the secret shopper part. And he just asked questions people don't normally ask. He asked about our team and he acted like he was interested in this condo, but I think he's somebody, and I think you should call him. And I don't know why. And so first chance I had that afternoon or evening, I picked up a phone, I called him, and he said, I told Paula not to have you call me. And I said, well, Mr. Hewlin, that's just how we do business. We're all about, ready, willing, and able. We're here to make whatever you need done. And, I probably had a smoother script than that. But at the end of it, he said, well, when you're back in town, let's meet next week. And I met him at the condo, and I have to confess, I thought, either he saw me online and thinks I'm cute, or he's trying to circumvent the commission, because he was oddly specific. Because in that first conversation, Brett, I said, hey, I've got 3 buyer's agents on call. They can meet you in 10 minutes. And he was like, wow, that's responsive. And I said, it's just how we do things. We want to be available when our clients need us, and no one person can do it alone. And anyway, he waited a week for me personally, which was, again, if you just wanted the property, there were flags that were interesting. But 10 minutes into that conversation, he says, do you know who Fannie Mae is? And by honest admission, Brett, I kind of did, but not totally. And he said, well, here's how the flow of money and title works. And then when we get homes back in foreclosure, we have to liquidate them. And I remember he looked me in the eye and he said, so I have to come clean. I'm with Fannie Mae. And he said, if we were able to give you 10 listings a month, would that be okay? And my response was absolutely okay.
Yeah.
And at the time, by the way, no one wanted that business because it was just low dollar, it wasn't highly, sought after. These were hurt houses, and there was and I was always intrigued by the stains on the walls and what's the story? What didn't work out here? So it was kind of an intriguing aspect of real estate that I enjoyed. And I also didn't have to personally lead generate for that business. Once we earned the right, it was all about my support staff and team. But we ended up in 2000. So fast forward from 2003 or 4, in 2010 and 11, we sold over 500 houses each of those years for Fannie, Freddie, Bank of America. Once you're proven in a certain segment of the market, it's like new construction. You have to have one. You've got to do something well that people wake up and go, hey, I want her or him to represent me because they'll do better than anyone else at helping me achieve my goals. But once you get one, man, you just got to project to the universe, to make sure that, you magnify that and add, more clients that are of that vein, especially again, if it's your core genius. And that's what we did with real estate in the foreclosure arena.
Yeah, but I think it back up before that, though, you had to have been doing a great job. Actually, before that, you had to be a listing agent first. Then you had to be doing a great job, 2. And 3, you had to answer the phone and be customer service oriented. And what happened is because you did all 3 of those well, somebody came and tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, I got a bigger opportunity for you. And exactly. I think people miss that part. They want the big opportunity, but they forget that what they're doing today is a reflection of what's to come tomorrow. And people will notice if you do a great job today and bring you opportunity tomorrow, as long as you continue to believe in that, right?
Yeah. Well, and you get one shot at a first impression. And so you just can't. And the other, I think, nugget I would share is don't underestimate, just because someone on the surface appears less capable or likely to help you really make a quantum leap. It's not them necessarily. It might be who they know, and you don't know who's who. And so again, I treat everybody with reverence and respect. And I also have an open mind, and then I make decisions based on, highest and best use of my time and energy. But the cool thing about having a team is you can delegate anybody that doesn't fit inside that tight window that helps you expand or advance the merits of your goals, if you will.
So expand on that.
Well, it's just about being selective in how you invest your time, but it's also being open-minded that there could be a concentric circle around any human being or any experience that could lead to something much bigger. And so I don't underestimate the power of everyone, their sphere, but at the same time, if you say yes to everything, you've effectively said no to lots of things. And some of those no's might lead you down. If you were to say no, you open up the door to another yes or opportunities. We all have a bandwidth of potential. The gift in having a team and what I built was that I could outsource and subcontract just about anything that I didn't feel served me, not only what I like to do, but what I'm best at. And, I would akin it to, so I remember early on, realized the reason I built a team, just to be honest, is one, I wanted leverage and I wanted an experience that I knew I couldn't give without help. It was all about my client's experience. Secondarily, I wanted to buy back freedom so that I could spend more time with my family and traveling and doing fun things. And the only way to do that is to have resources. And so it was a two-part thing. And one part of the story we haven't touched on is in 2001. So 2 years, literally a year into my first Keller Williams experience, I went to the regional owners and knocked on their door, and Bob and Kay, invited me to the conversation. And I've said, I want to be an operating partner and open an office. I believe in this company, who we are, what we are, and why we are. And I think my gift is really teaching, coaching, and training. And as much as I love selling houses, that's another lane, but it's not really where I see myself from a legacy perspective. And they believed and bought into my belief in myself. And I didn't even have a broker's license. I remember a few weeks before we were about to open, I kind of woke up going, it was maybe a couple of months going, man, who's going to be the broker? Like, don't we need a broker? That's how naive I was about certain parts of it. But I'd already gone out and found a location. I'd already found, 20 people who are advocates for a brand that no one knew about. And I'd already sold them on the idea of, how we're going to change the way people do real estate, which we, in my humble opinion, did. And, but that after doing the first one in 2001, I could still run my team and run that. By 2003, when I opened Decatur, in 2005, Midtown, I woke up one day going, man, I'm trying to be too many things to too many people, and I'm coming up short everywhere. I wasn't returning calls as regularly as and you call me, you're going to get a call back same day, hopefully same hour if I can do it. But you just have to be careful with that mindset, because you'll end up, watering the weeds and chasing things you shouldn't. But I just knew, responsiveness is probably the number one attribute. And the lesson in all this is when I got to that third office, I realized that, I sat down with my team, and I remember having a heart to heart and saying, look, I want to be an advocate for the MRA. I want to prove this works. And I want to extricate myself from the day to day. Are you on board with this? Because if you are, every single one of you is going to have to step up as a leader and own your lane and own your part in this. And I'll jump in for some accountability once a week. And, I'll continue to nurture leads, because I'll just forward them to the team. And that's still part of my job description today. And they bought in, Brett, and it was cool. And it wasn't long thereafter. Again, we migrated into REO, and we were doing, out of the 500 houses we sold back-to-back years, I bet I saw 2 of them. And when I would get, clients calls, I would sit in on the first consultation just to make sure they felt nurtured and honored. And I would take good notes, and then I would hand it off gracefully to one of my team members. And and I had a really cool script. It's like going to a doctor. I'm the specialist. You probably don't want the specialist checking your vitals or taking your insurance information, or, or even drawing blood. They don't do 1,000 blood, draws a day. That's the person you want taking blood, not a guy's like, all right, I think it was that vein, or was it that one? And so, it was all about specializing. And then I would promote it that I've constructed this experience and environment so that you have an unbelievably awesome experience and you get the best of the best. And we have specialists. I've got contract to close. I've got marketing. I've got a runner that'll make sure that you run out of flyers. I'll have them, inside of an hour, replenished. And then you've got me when the problem escalates. I'm the guy that goes in when it's really, 11th hour, do or die, critical decision making.
Yeah. One of my questions for you is kind of like, how have you weaved in the DNA to your team? Like, what's the DNA of your team? And I'm actually kind of answering that question a little bit with your answer here is by being specialists, we're able to create amazing experience. And I don't know if that's your DNA or not, but it sure looks that in your answer.
Well, it was kind of out of necessity again, because when you open an office, I mean, you've done this, it's a grind. I mean, the first year of a new office it's like almost like a newborn, it's just, it never ends. There's always something, and you've got to figure out furniture and fixtures and lighting and the location and the lease and, train a new leader, and you've got a new MCA, and you've got to, so the point is, it was out of necessity that I learned to delegate, kind of level up my delegation. But I'll be honest, you can't just delegate and hope for the best, because you have high standards and, you demand a cultural experience that's aligned with your heart. You've got to hire the right people that's in their DNA already, and they're self-starters, and they're also self-sufficient, and they recognize, you just don't want codependency when it comes to somebody who's leading part of your team. And so in 2002 or 3, I took the first career vision class, ever created. And Bev Steiner came to Atlanta and taught it. And it changed my world, because I stopped making decisions and hiring people just based on a resume and an hour or two conversation. And I started, going 3 deep on references, and I looked at their life journey and asked way more questions than and then I got to this part of the conversation, Brett. It's the context of the book I'm writing. And it's, how can I best understand where you want to be in 5 years holistically, not just financially, not just in your job, not just in skills, but I'm talking family, health, travel, hobbies. What does it look like for you to wake up 5 years from now, turn around and look back at your journey and declare that was awesome? And when you get really clear about that story, and you play that into the accountability piece with them when you meet, and you play that into your consulting experience, it just changes. When you talk about culture, those conversations by nature are culture rich. When it's all about them holistically, it changes the dynamic of the relationship, and then performance usually follows it. And it doesn't mean you don't make bad hires occasionally or a mistake, but you make far fewer. And the relationship energy is the key to my success, to be honest.
Yeah, I love it. I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking, going, if I'm listening on this call, what are the success traits I'm listening for? What are the things Rick did that I should be paying attention to? And, obviously cut the hair. We'll go back to that, because that's just part of who we are. But your commitment to lead generation was out the gate. You never lost that commitment. I think even today, you're still committed to lead generation. Is just a part of who you are. It's just the DNA of inside of you as a business person, right? I think you made comment that database is such a strong part of your business. It always has been, even to the day you were trying to mail merge labels. You had a database from the get-go, because you can't do a mail merge without a database, right?
Correct.
Your faith around getting into a relationship with an assistant early on, and just committing to the process of growing through models and systems is a success trait, right? And you proved it out. I also think your meter or your thermometer is you create amazing customer service in everything that you do. And if you ever find yourself where you feel like you're not creating amazing customer service, you wake up and you realize you're either missing a person or you're missing something in your life, because that's your meter on when Rick gets a little sideways, right? Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that an accurate statement?
100% accurate. I mean, the experience is everything. First impression and the final experience are the two most important. And you
wouldn't have been an REO agent had that not been a value of yours, right?
Well, and my goal was to try to My goal was to bring a retail experience to REO so that it didn't look and feel like, an old shoe with holes in it. We wanted to, and so I think our abilities to assess value and highest and best use and potential. I had some really smart people working for me back then who were absolutely amazing human beings and absolute workhorses too. They were, and to be honest, here's another piece of the puzzle. Compensation is a big deal. You got to pay people fairly and honestly more than fair when they're truly talent. And you also want to incentivize the right things. And I bonused on profitability, and man, I had some people making significant money in what was perceived a support role.
Yeah. So obviously REOs, there's probably people on this call that don't even know what an REO is because they're not as very heavily in the market these days. But your team evolved, and your team today looks a lot different than it did back then. And you achieved MREA status as an individual team owner, and then at some point in time, I know your team today has 2 other partners, right? Tell me about that evolution.
So again, going back to what you said, you reinforced a point that I think is vital, is that, when your clients are always the epicenter of the decision-making chain, what's best for them is best for me. At each phase where I made some critical changes to the team, it was always about creating an environment that was good for the team, but even better for our clients. And so when REO hit, I kind of put the retail, resale, we still managed our database, but realized the percentage of people capable of buying changed significantly. So we had to, shifting is a big deal. You have to be prepared to face the market of the moment. And even better if you get out in front of it before the shift, because everyone will catch on at some point and the opportunity will go away or not be as plentiful. And so again, I got REO in 03 almost by luck, but by the time 09, I looked like a genius. Everyone's like, how did you do this? And I'm like, it came to me and it looked like something I could manage better than most. And they have, it's been a real symbiotic thing. And so when we've, I guess 2012, things started to lighten up. REO sort of faded, and today it's less than 1%. There was a time when it was about, between REO and short sales, I think we were looking at 50, 60% of the inventory. So it was a massive play, and now it's less than 1%. If you ask an agent that's been in business a year or less what a short sale is, they'll probably look at you cross-eyed. And there was a time where if you didn't understand short sales, you probably just gave away 50% of your opportunity to make money in our business. And so that goes back to knowledge, training, and being aware of the market of the moment. So when we came out of that in 2012, I realized that, I'd kind of put my referral-based, database managed systems, on hold, not entirely, but it was on autopilot, if you will. And then I also realized for me to feed this huge team of REO people with that business going away, I had to come up with another strategy. And that's where I found Mark Takis, and he and I merged, and he brought retail resale. He was a neighborhood expert in the I-20 corridor in East Atlanta. And I was kind of more Brookhaven, Buckhead, at least by default from my early days when I lived in that area and worked that area mostly. And so between us, I realized I'd rather own, half of something and have a much bigger pie than own all of something, like a personal pan pizza, if you will. I'd rather have a huge extra large pizza and share it. And those words came straight from Gary. He's always said he'd rather share the experience with quality, talented people and have a smaller piece, but of a much bigger pie. And that was my mindset. So I was willing to sell 50% of my company. He paid me to buy half of what I had. And we did a merge where we kind of analyzed his volume in business, my volume in business, my assets, cash in the bank, and, furniture, fixture, and equipment. And we came up with a fair trade number, and he bought it. And the agreement, though, was that he would run the day-to-day and further that resale, retail, direct farming strategy, that, more traditional path that for, again, 4 or 5 years straight, we were heavily vested in REO. And so that's how that happened. Fast forward 2 years ago, we realized we were still missing a niche in our plan. I'm still the REO guy, and I've still, drive leads because of my relationships and sphere. But and he was doing resale retail, and we're like, man, if we had new construction, that changes the dynamic of and all of a sudden we're not on a 2-legged stool, we've got a 3-legged stool. And one day REO, by the way, will come back. It's inevitable that there will be some version of either wholesaling through syndications or banks, or it's just inevitable. And so I'm braced and ready and still have that network at my avail. But when it's less than 1%, it's a waste to put all your money for sure and energy into that. But we brought on Pam Ahern, who had a real strong presence with builders and builder services, and what an asset that is to our team. So each of us agreed to come up. We kind of reproduce that same structure where we brought her in as a third owner and now own a third of something, but where we were probably just ahead of MREA status. Our goal this year is to be honest, I had to call yesterday to make sure I was clear. 350 units, 155 million is our goal for this year. So I'd rather own a third of that business than all of a $20 million business. Does that make sense?
100%.
But everyone's got to be culturally connected and committed to the outcome. And everyone has to recognize that without all of our contribution, it's probably going to fall short. And
all right, Rick, rapid fire here. Your best day in real estate.
Well, after the day I met you.
Oh, no.
I'm looking for some smiles, man. Somebody find that funny.
No, I'm getting great comments over here. Thank you very much.
I'm not looking at any of the comments for the record, but I think when I stand in front of a group and share my story and experiences and get feedback that I feel makes a difference. I mean, every day when I'm in front of quality people who are fighting to become their best, that's my best day. So that's a airy-fairy answer, but I live to just engage and entertain and also enlighten. And that's why we're on earth. I think we're here to gather as much information and experiential baggage and then unpack it with as many people as you can so that they fast track a better experience for themselves and maybe leapfrog over a few potholes along the way. I would honestly say the day that I was invited at Keller Williams was absolutely the most instrumental day of my financial and future period, because I joined a company where learning and personal growth mattered, and holistic personal growth was the most important element. It wasn't not about just how many houses can you sell. And I found, remember, that network is your net worth. I found myself in rooms with people that I would never have known otherwise, who were drawn to that room because Gary Keller at the heart of it and Mo Anderson at the heart of it were contributory. They were givers, they weren't takers. And they recognized that the power of a group is way more impactful than that of an individual. So the day I joined Keller absolutely pinched me. I can't believe I get to be me, because it led me down a path of coaching, training, and building businesses and opening offices and learning through and with people that are some of the most high-minded, amazing human beings on the planet.
Perfect. Well, Rose wants to know, and I think we all want to know, what was your greatest failing forward moment?
Well, so I don't know. I'm feeling compelled to be super authentic. I would say that, the failure of my first marriage was probably the most painful. And we just woke up in different places, and she made the decision. It wasn't mine. And I had to learn to adapt to rules that weren't governed by me. And so the silver lining back to that premise, one, it was extremely painful because after, 10 schools and lots of, as a kid, my only real purposeful commitment to myself is that I would never be that kind of parent. I would never, put my kids in that sort of stressful situation. And I found myself out of control. And the lesson was, one, I can't control everything. I can only control my energy around it. And I became a much better, more intentional father and a better friend to her as well along the way. And also the silver lining is that I remarried a few years later, and I've become a father to 2 additional amazing boys. And I have 4 boys instead of 2. And, I think the world gives you what you need, not always what you want, and not always in the way that you think you deserve it. But if you frame it properly, there's a lesson. So that's a personal experience. I would say my greatest failure business-wise was investing in 6 houses in Buckhead, slightly outside of Buckhead, almost towards Bolton and Marietta, in 2000. That would have been 6 or 7. And we all know what happened in 2008. It became a $2.2 million hole in my bank account and a judgment against me personally. I learned a lot about development and the risks attached to it and the timing factors. And that's a whole nother story all its own. But, when you wake up and a bank can literally take all of your money overnight out of your account, it changes that sense of freedom and that sense of self-confidence that I thought I had at that point. And to be honest, vulnerability, I think, can also make you a better human being. And so I realized the lesson was it's still a people puzzle, even though it was a strategic default on the part of a company. I was just one investor, by the way, in this company. I wasn't fronting it. I wasn't spearheading it. I just put in half the money and was a third owner. But there's some words in bank document called jointly and severably that you need to be careful of. And when it says jointly and severably, that means even if you're only a fraction of the ownership, you can be held accountable to the entire debt. And that was a massive lesson and a tremendous failure, but also a success story because, fast forward 3 years later, I was able to help the bank sell those houses to an investor who, by the way, made a killing on them because they bought them right. And they had the capacity to weather the storm of the Great Depression, or certainly a bad season from 08 to 11 or so. But I also, I had to write $100,000 check out to walk away from it after losing about $250,000. And there was part of me that was devastated by the idea of just giving more money to it's like bad money on bad money on bad money. But it was the most liberating thing I've done, is to hand deliver that check and with a smile, thank them for working with me and helping me through a difficult season financially.
Wow.
So
Rick, I want to give you the floor. Lots of people look up to you. Lots of people are inspired by the successes you've had. What's the best advice you could give somebody listening to this interview that really would help them on their journey?
Well, we're all in different places, and there's a season and a reason for everything. Don't squander a good failure or squander a stressful moment and just dismiss it. I think what I've done a good job is always taking a deep breath, recognizing there are things I can and can't control, and don't confuse the two. If you can't control it, do the best you can and move on. If you can control it, make a difference, and then swallow the egg. If it's a rotten egg, you created it, own it and be sincere about it. And, I think my clients have always appreciated that, I'm willing to write a check or figure it out or fix things. But then there's times where it's not your fault. And if you can't control it, it's a cancer that you're carrying around unnecessarily. And so in the same context that I think that's how you deal with trauma and tragedy or unexpected setbacks. I think the greatest gift you give yourself is the gift of potential, and to wake up every day and recognize, if it's to be, why not me? Keller Williams not only brought an environment of shared learning and incredible. I've had lifelong friends that, again, I wouldn't have otherwise. But I've also role modeled. Like, good people want to share their path and their journey and their blueprint. And the MREA book is genius. By honest admission, again, early on, I didn't, once I started opening offices and realized my core gift was really training and consulting and running businesses, I kept that thing going primarily because I wanted to prove that it could be done, and no one had done it yet. Yeah. And so to this day, I'm super proud of the people that wake up every day and my name's on the, part of the ownership team and the sign and fight the good fight for all the right reasons. And it gives me incredible joy to know that the models and systems work and they are replicatable. You just have to put one foot in front of the other and follow them, and then do the work.
Rick, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for your partnership, of course.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's a great reminder that ain't no mountain high enough, sir.
No way. And we're in this together. We're all here to help each other.